Hi there, if you're watching this, it means that I really like your feedback on this talk I've been preparing. So if you could let me know what you think, the things you think work really well, and the things I could do either in what I'm saying or the way I'm coming across to make it better, that would be really appreciated. Thank you. Have you ever wondered how many life experiences you've simply forgotten over all those years? Favourite novels and hilarious conversations, monumental parties, and those friendships that seem to come and then go from your life. Maybe scenery that took your breath away. And of course, many of us spend years learning things academically. Somehow it never quite stuck. All of that stuff is susceptible to melting away over time. But then other memories are just inexplicably, they're just right there, easily recalled, and sometimes so quick that it seems to happen in a heartbeat. Knowledge and skills that really are so well learned, they're just a part of you, like breathing. They require very little conscious thought. Well, if the stats are anything to go by, after just 1 week from now, you could have forgotten as much as 94% of this talk. No pressure, huh? Well, making things memorable it's really important to me because I'm passionate about what I do. I care about my vocation. And what I do is I help leaders to learn new skills and new behaviours so that they can fulfill their potential. And of course, to motivate people better and build successful organisations. And yet, time and again, I'm coming up against barriers because we forget stuff. So for over 20 years, I've been battling with forgetting. Time and again, there seem to be these two critical variables that cropped up as I'm working away trying to transform leaders and to keep them transformed. And those two variables are time and stickiness. Now, there was an admin error, a little faux pas. A few years ago, I was booked to facilitate an influencing skills event for a cohort of leaders. And we had a good time that day. I was doing my best facilitating, creating the highs and the lows, the light and the shade, blending all the different learning activities together, dropping in a bit of a magic trick or two and getting some rapport with the group. Anything to underline the key learning points and to throw everything at it to make it as memorable as possible. I thought I'd done a decent enough job. The evaluation suggested that the delegates had found it a useful day. But then, through the faintest slip of a finger on a keyboard somewhere, I was booked 3 months later to run exactly the same event for exactly the same group of leaders. It was lunchtime that day before one of the delegates had a strange inkling that we'd done this work together before somewhere in the past. The exact same workshop, just 3 months apart, for the exact same people. Well, I flipped into my facilitator mode and I tried to tease anything to do with influencing skills from the group in front of me. Zero. Nada. Nothing. Zip. Zilch. Just gone. All that potential for growth. All that expense of bringing us together. And so very little to show for it. So the gap between when we acquire knowledge and when we do something with it is just too great. It's just too big. Knowledge is a lot like fresh food, actually. It goes off quite quickly if you don't use it. Now, the second variable is stickiness. And our brains require anchors to cement the new knowledge into memory. And emotional intensity works really well for this. Let's work through an example. So on the 11th of September 2001, you will have been, if you were alive, somewhere in the world feeling probably sickeningly numb from the deep shock of seeing the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center fall to the ground. And of course, so many lives tragically lost that day. So raise your hand if you recall where you were when that was happening. Maybe you can bring to mind some other details of that situation that you were in at the time. That was over 18 years ago now. Keep your hand raised if you can remember your Christmas presents from just 2 years ago. Okay, not bad. And now keep your hand raised again if you remember what you had for dinner just 2 weeks ago. Well, emotion is the discerning factor here, the sticky factor. And it's recorded deep in our limbic brain, and it acts like an anchor to enhance our powers of recall. Now, the night I asked my girlfriend to marry me, I really recall the way that the moonlight cast a silvery path across the Mediterranean Sea all the way to the horizon. And the warmth of the Cypriot breeze as I began my spiel that I'd practiced way too much. I said, once you finish that glass of champagne, I'm going to ask you to marry me. Always one for a challenge. My girlfriend downed the champagne in one go. Go on then, she offered. So I took one knee. Would you do me? Folks, you know how the rest of it goes. And then, after she said yes, we got totally naked, stripped all our clothes off, and went swimming. There were definitely 3 full moons out that night. And of course, much to the amusement of the other couples who were making out on the sunbeds on the beach, watching it all unfold. Well, that was 20 years ago. But I reckon all of us will have vivid memories about our love life, the ecstasy, the pain. Let's put it to the test. See if you can turn to the person next to you and share the name of your first crush. Just checking, is anyone actually sat next to their first crush right now? That would be a cause for celebration. You get the picture. If there's no emotion, if there's no experience, then we have to rely on things like repetition for memory, which isn't bad. I mean, that's useful for things like passing exams. But it's less adaptable and susceptible to fading once the repetitive action stops. So if we're going to give ourselves the biggest chance to embed learning, then we need training activities with a 0 learning gap. So where knowing and doing are happening together, and also harnessing the power of emotion to cement the whole experience into memory. Now, I'm proud to say I come from an Air Force family, and many years ago, my cousin Nick was a rookie instructor in the Air Force, and he was observing 2 of the most experienced Hercules C-130 pilots in the whole RAF. I mean, these 2 guys had racked up over 20,000 hours flying together. You name it, they'd flown it. Dangerous combat operations, peacetime missions. They'd travelled the world side by side together in the cockpit of this iconic military aircraft. And after spending so long flying together, they'd developed their own little ways and practices of doing things. Along comes my cousin, a fresh-faced, wet behind the ears instructor, to conduct their observation. And what he sees and observes is them doing their own special thing. And that wasn't in line with the protocols and best practice of flying the aircraft. He has to say something fairly and professionally. On the first day, he got told to shove his observations up his arse. On the second day, he got told to shove his observations up his arse. The third day rolls around, and the pilots were again flying the simulator. But this time, just through sheer irony, they fell foul of the special way of doing things that they'd created themselves. And that resulted in them crashing the aircraft. One of the highly decorated pilots stands up and storms out of the sim. And after some moments of silence, the remaining pilot reaches the confession point, the all-important confession point. Okay, he said, let's talk about what I need to do so that this never happens again. You see, by crashing their plane in the sim, these 2 pilots had experienced the emotional anchor that's needed to make the learning stick. Some things can only be achieved through observation and realization, not on a course some 3 months hence. These pilots had a huge ego block to being observed, and yet they experienced the most powerful realization through it. Do you see how it's the emotional experience of being watched? The thing we fear, the thing that's a bit cringy and a bit awkward. Well, that's the most powerful thing. That's the awkward thing. This is exactly the thing that changes our relationship with the knowledge. So, if being watched and being observed in the moment is so transformational, why aren't leaders champing at the bit to be observed? Well, being watched elicits a strange reaction from people, quite frankly. Even saying it sounds creepy. I've been watching you. Yet we're under surveillance 24/7 these days, and not just by the Alexa in your kitchen. But as parents, our values and behaviours are being absorbed by young minds. Social media enables everyone to be seen and observed. And simply having a human-to-human interaction requires us to observe each other and make meaning of what the other person's saying. I mean, take a look at the person sat next to you. Let's face it, they've already been watching you up to now. So my question is, how do you react when you're being watched? Do you hide away? You act all cool? Maybe you style it out like an embarrassing dad? Nailed the stereotype. Or maybe you choose to be observed. Maybe you consciously step in to the limelight as a performer or a public figure, pushing into the observation space and inviting comment, being vulnerable to judgment in the pursuit of something greater. But how would you feel about being observed at work? Or to help you get better at your job? It's a bit strange, isn't it? Because in one situation we're okay with being watched, but in another we're not. What's going on there? Observation can feel creepy and awkward, or plain stressful if we let it. I mean, in the UK we've got Ofsted, the Office for Standards in Education. And they send inspectors into all colleges and schools to evaluate the overall quality of the educational establishment. Often with very little warning to prepare themselves, this method of observing teachers conducting lessons causes untold stress and sends schools into panic mode, giving observation a bit of a villainous reputation, to be honest, because it's being used to judge you, grade you. And if you don't pass the grading observation, some serious implications from that. Also, it's not surprising that leaders resist the idea of observation when leadership culture can be such a power game in many companies. You know, when it's a power game, the players of the game are very adept in the subtle art of politics and perception and positioning. And just like any power game, there are winners and there are losers. There are weaknesses to be exposed and leveraged for gain. And I think this sort of thing's, well, it's sort of behaviour that Mara and Steve Klemic, who are the founders of the Heart Styles philosophy, would say is below the line self-promoting. It's that egotistical control, that competition, striving and undermining others so that I can succeed myself. And why would any such leader in that power game willingly expose themselves to being vulnerable and the vulnerability of observation? You know, it wouldn't pay for them to admit they've got some blind spots and some weaknesses, because they'd be made to pay for that. So there are both personal and cultural obstacles stopping us from feeling 100% comfortable using observation for leadership development. But get over them, we must. We owe it to our employees to become better leaders and faster. We haven't got years to take up to become better leaders. It needs to happen quicker. We owe it to ourselves to innovate and ask this question: how can we do this better? Would Serena Williams play Wimbledon without her coach observing her from the VIP box? No. Would you learn to drive without an instructor by your side observing you? No. So why should leaders not have the same opportunity to get better? Observation in the moment creates better people, and I believe better people make better leaders. I know it feels weird to start with. Everyone goes through that initial stage of thinking, I can't believe I did that. Everyone hates me. But that's why it works, because it's emotional, it's tough. So, is anyone out there overcoming these obstacles and leveraging observation to elevate their people and their performance? Well, up to this point, we've sort of been implying that leaders need to be improved. What about raising awareness of all the good stuff they're doing already, all the stuff that's working? Are they aware of that? So that they can own it and do it more often? Well, O.C. Tanner are masters at this. They're masters of positive observation. They're in the business of appreciation. And they help some of the world's biggest brands to express real thanks and gratitude to their staff through tailored reward and recognition programs. OC Tanner also embody a really strong appreciation culture themselves. And during my last visit, I witnessed a 5-year celebration for one of their team. Let's call her Sarah. Now, every single one of the 50 plus employees gathered around in the office. And after they'd exchanged gifts and she'd been presented with those, many of her close friends and colleagues shared really heartfelt messages of what Sarah had meant to each of them over the past few years. It wasn't about hitting targets. It wasn't about spreadsheets. It wasn't about output. Stories emerged of Sarah working tirelessly for a local charity, and another moment when Sarah had been there for a colleague who had been going through cancer. And by the time all the observations had been shared, there was not a dry eye in the office. Sarah's contribution had been noticed deeply by the people that mattered most. And when we observe our colleagues doing great work, we recognise them for it, so many great things happen. OC Tanner have measured well-being increase, innovation increase, engagement of staff increase, all dramatically increase. This is the power of peer-to-peer recognition from people you trust, your co-workers, the people around you, the people you care about. In education, Professor Matt O'Leary is leading the movement for using teacher-on-teacher lesson observations as a way of simply helping teachers and lecturers to improve their quality, really stepping away from the Ofsted inspections and observations. This is peer-to-peer work. Now, Matt, who's one of the directors of C-Space, which is an educational research facility in Birmingham, realised that when observations are used as a weapon of judgment and assessment, guess what? Just like the old Ofsted ones, there's very little improvement in teacher quality. In fact, the stress, the nervousness, and the plain unfairness of the whole thing has meant that teachers put up barriers, or worse still, fake their own development just to hit the inspection. So what Matt and his colleagues have done is they're helping teachers to break down the barriers to observation and turn observation into a collaborative learning opportunity that teachers can then choose to participate in. Now, once through the initial awkwardness, and it's a bit clunky to start with, and with a bit of work refining their coaching skills, that critical inquiry and appreciation technique, then teachers are reporting record levels of engagement. Matt and his colleagues have created a cycle of peer observation, which is like a structured flow diagram of how to conduct observations well. And one of the participants in his research, who was an early years lecturer at an English university, described peer observation like this. It's given us the oxygen to breathe. And when you're given oxygen, it helps to breathe new life into your thinking and your teaching. They're referring to observation as oxygen. One of the organisations exemplifying real and rapid learning is NextJump. Now, NextJump are a $2 billion e-commerce business headquartered in New York City. And the CEOs there, Charlie Kim and Megan Messenger, have built world-class learning culture based on a deep awareness of our blind spots. Now, they at NextJump call them their backhands. Ultimately, NextJump's become a vehicle for people development and revenue, not just revenue. And in a sector that suffers from 40% or over 40% labour turnover, NextJump staff, the turnover there at NextJump is virtually zero. So NextJumpers love their organisation, and it's a place where time spent developing people is the business. It's not an add-on like it is in so many other organisations. It's everyone's responsibility. NextJump have named their Pairing Up initiative Talking Partners, which is just one of the many initiatives they've implemented, which has brought them to the world's attention. And every employee is paired up with a talk partner who becomes a trusted confidant, a sounding board, a friend, providing that tight relationship upon which to navigate the adversity, the learning, the vulnerability that's so encouraged in this company. Notice how most organisations avoid adversity and vulnerability. Not here. Can you imagine sharing an emotional journey with someone who's got your back and you've got theirs, no matter whether you're having a good day or a bad one? But talk partners aren't just there to be your busy mate or hit the gym with. They're designed to push you, to observe you, to give you the feedback that you need, not just the platitudes you might want. They give that tough love necessary to ensure you're in a stretch zone place, a place of learning. High support, high challenge. And to make sure you're out of your depth, personally and professionally. And you do the same for them. Why? Because feeling uncomfortably supported is exactly where the learning is, in real time and emotional, just like observational learning should be. There's no practice field there, no simulator at Next Jump. All the learning is live in the business. And as leaders, pairing up means observing each other's team meetings, asking difficult coaching questions, being the talk partner you can vent to if you need to, knowing they've got your back and you've got theirs. You don't have to just look good. You can just be honest and learn and grow. So pairing up leaders for me is definitely the start point for the journey into observational learning. It's absolutely worth it. All three of these examples share similar themes, similar traits. Trust, togetherness, and of course, honest development. Being honest with yourself, that realization, just like the Hercules pilots went through. With the positive intent of personal growth, not judging, not grading, not for performance management, not to get you out of the business, nothing like that. It's just for your growth. Why else were we put on this planet and given the gift of life if it wasn't to learn and grow? But I get it. Being watched feels awkward and even intrusive for some people. But is worrying what other people think about us a good enough reason to avoid all that learning potential that comes with it? Observation, with its zero learning gap and the emotional glue, is empowering pilots to fly planes better. It's helping teachers to educate better. And it's helping world-class organisations become places of work where every employee feels engaged and appreciated. So if you believe, as I do, that every learning opportunity is a gift of unlimited potential, it's time to step up, get some courage. Because hiding behind the numbers and the output and the workload and the ego, that's just easy to avoid the hard work of self-development. You want to inspire people. If you want to be wiser, more connected to other people, bringing resources and people together to achieve something far greater than the sum of its parts, and seek the discomfort that this brings. Open up to observation, pair up, and get uncomfortable to be a better leader. And invite someone you trust to watch you, because it's an experience you will never forget. Thank you.